I'm working good. How you doing? Good. How you been feeling? This is warm in here.
Last session.
So that we don't prolong the time. So that we don't prolong the time, because we have a quorum here, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask you to do a roll call vote so we can establish a quorum.
Dr. Coleman.
Present.
Dr. May.
Present.
Mr. Horsley.
Present.
Ms. Morrill.
Present.
Ms. Jackson.
Present.
Ms. Oswald. Is she on?
Present.
Present. Ms. Lane,
And Ms. Tisdale.
thank you. I would like a motion to approve the agenda. So moved. May I have a second?
Second.
I'm going to still request a roll call vote.
Okay. Ms. Oswald.
Yes.
Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
Morrill.
Yes.
Mr. Horsley.
Yes.
Dr. May.
Yes,
Dr. Coleman.
Yes.
I would like to make a point of order for the clerk. She may not know that Oswald is a non-voting member.
Oh.
Thank you. We'll therefore move now into the proposed 2023-2024 budget.
Right. Good evening, special. I don't need it. This should be on. Okay. Good evening, special. Good evening, Special Administrative Board, Dr. Pruitt Adams, colleagues and community. Tonight, I stand before you to do the 2023-2024 budget presentation. And before I start, I do want to just introduce some members of the finance team. Testing. No. Okay, all right. Well, you all know, I can project pretty loud, so I probably don't need the microphone anyway. So good evening, everyone. Again, I'd like to just have the members of the finance team stand for the benefit of the new board members who may or may not have met the team. We have Tony Ziegler, our new accounting manager, who's here with us tonight. Our payroll administrator, Mr. Thomas Howard. Director of Federal Programs, Ms. Latina Curtis. I'm looking for finance. Okay. Safety and Security, Assistant Director, Mr. Jamal Porter. Jane Crum over in Facilities, our Administrative Assistant. Yvonne Green, Director of Facilities. I believe that's all of the team that's here with us on tonight. So, all right, testing. Okay. So, of course, they have played a very important role in getting to this point today of putting together the 23-24 budget. And so I did ask them to have a presence here on tonight. So without any further ado, I will get into the budget presentation. You all should have a hard copy of this information, as well as the budget is on the screen as well. So one of the things that we always do when we adopt a school district budget, just like everything else we do in the school district, your budget should tie back to the mission and vision of the school district, okay? So of course, the mission of our school district, the Riverview Garden School District, along with families and the community, nurtures academic excellence in all students, preparing them to be college and career ready in an ever-changing society. That is our mission. That's what we're doing. That's what indeed our budget reflects. The next screen talks about our vision. What is it that we vision or we look to do in the Riverview Garden School District? The Riverview Garden School District creates a community of learners equipped to be competitors in a global society and leaders demonstrating social and civic responsibilities. So that is the vision of the district. And again, our budget should simply mirror and be consistent with those values. when we look at our value statements in the school district as well, we are indeed student focused. That's what the budget should be as well. Students are at the forefront of all the decisions that we make. When we make staffing decisions, when we make capital improvements, we do all of this with our students in mind. Meeting the needs of the whole child, a safe learning climate and caring staff are essential for social, emotional, and academic needs of all students. And again, those are essential components, and that's what our budget should be reflecting as well. The next slide, collaboration and integrity. We collaborate. Our budget includes feedback from families, communities, supporters, okay? And so again, that's one of the purposes of this public hearing, to get feedback from families, from those in the community, because we should collaborate when establishing a school district's budget. Integrity. We should be about honesty and transparency. And again, we're going to have those honest and transparent conversations as it relates to where we are financially. Okay. The very next slide, I will pause here because this is really will drive a lot of the discussion that we will have on tonight. Okay. We're going to start talking about the operating budget, and we're going to start with the revenues. All right. And for the benefit of the new board members, I don't want to take for granted some of these things. And so I want to make sure that to the best of my ability, I explain and give you a real picture of where we are in terms of our finances. So the very first column says revenue. And if you look down that column, you will see all of the sources of revenue that this school district receives monies from, okay? Current and delinquent property taxes, that's one. We get a substantial amount of money from current and delinquent property taxes. That's where you and I pay our real estate taxes on our homes, and those monies go to the school district. Proposition C, that is the sales tax, passed more than 40 years ago. The sales tax in Missouri, those monies, school districts are entitled to a portion of those revenues as well. We've got some local entities that we receive monies from. We've got some monies at the county levels that we're entitled to. But I want to pause at where it says state revenue. If you look at where it says state revenue and go all the way over to the right, the far right column represents the budgeted column or the budgeted amounts for next year's budget, 23 and 24. In that column, we see state revenues at more than $32 million, okay? Let me explain. The majority of this school district's finances comes from state revenues. That is the foundation formula, okay? Those are income taxes and sales taxes that we pay. And those monies all go into a formula, and they are proportioned back out to school districts, all right? So by far, our biggest revenue generator is state revenue, okay? We're gonna talk about some things that tie back to that number, because it's gonna be very important in the future that we focus on some things so that we maximize those budget numbers. Again, we have federal monies. I introduced our director of federal programs. We get a really sizable amount of money for Title I, being a poverty district, a low-income district. There are federal revenues that we are entitled to, more than $10 million that we're looking at for next year. ESSER 1, 2, and 3, you've heard me talk about these ESSER programs over the last 2 years. ESSER 1 is completely over with. ESSER 2 is winding down. We've got about 3 or 4 more months to spend ESSER 2 funds. And then our ESSER 3 funds, we have roughly another year and a few months to exhaust those funds as well. And there is a slide where we go more into the ESSER funds, and we'll talk about those as well. Also, we see monies under student activities and under the other section. So when we look at those budgeted numbers, okay, we are looking at possibly bringing in close to $95 million in this operating budget cycle or the next operating budget cycle, okay? And again, the biggest piece of that money coming from state revenues. Second to state revenues, we see that current and delinquent property taxes are the next generator or biggest generator of revenue from the school district. I also want to point out, ESSER 3 right now has about $20 million budgeted for next fiscal year. That is going away after next year, okay? And so I have shared with my colleagues, I'm sharing with the board in this public forum that, of course, we have to start, we're going to utilize those funds to the best of our ability this year, but we will not see those kinds of monies going into the next fiscal year, okay? Those were temporary monies that the federal government came up with to address learning loss and a number of other things so that we can continue to operate. And those monies were for a 3-year cycle. And fortunately, we are at the end of, next year will be the end of those cycles for those ESSER revenues. So I did want to just point that out to make sure the board knows that those funds are going away. So now let's talk about the expenses. We talk about bringing in $95 million in revenue. Let's also talk about the expenses of the school district, okay? By far, under expenditures, you've got the first 4 columns all deal with salary and benefits. Okay, the biggest expense of any school district, whether it's Riverview Gardens, whether it's Hazelwood, whether it's DeSoto or any school district, is people. Okay, salary and benefits. As you can see, we're budgeting about $40 million in salaries. And let me say, that number includes a salary increase that you all allowed the employees to have going into next fiscal year. That number also includes an increase in some of our staffing. The staffing plan has continuously been brought before the board to bring in additional staff, all right? That number, we're hiring more safety officers. That was one of the things that the principals have requested, a safety officer at every school. We're trying to make sure that we have the teachers and staff as well. So those numbers are represented in the budget as well. Purchase services. If you look over to the right, you see a big number, $19 million. Again, that allows us to continue our work with Solution Tree. It allows us to do some social and emotional things. And so that number, again, next year, that number will come down substantially because a lot of that is driven through the ESSER grants. Tuition. This is not tuition that's going out as a result of what was the Supreme Court decision where we had to pay tuition for our students to attend other districts. This is actually tuition for our students in transition, okay? Students that are residents of this community who may be living in other school areas. We're required to pay for their tuition, or we're billed for a portion of their tuition in other school districts. And so that falls under our student services department. Supplies, utilities, again, we're seeing our utilities constantly rise. We're opening up the FCRC building with full access as well. And so we fully expect that our utility costs will continue to rise as well. So when we talk about total expenditures, again, on the front side, the revenues were about $95 million. On the expenditure side, we're talking about $85 million, okay? And we're always in a good situation when your revenues outpace your expenditures, okay? And so that's always a good position to be in. I'll talk more about that transfer to Fund 4 when we talk about capital projects, but we will reference that number when we get to the capital budget. The very next slide, which is extremely important, this slide talks about our fund balance, okay? And that lights up Miss Morrow Reel's ears all the time because she knows for a long time. Her and the administrative board have been making sure that the district has met its obligation in terms of meeting the minimum 15% fund balance. And so, Ms. Morrow Reel, I'm happy to project this year or going into next year that we're looking at about a 30% fund balance. Okay. Pretty good, okay. But again, all right, we know what drives that, those ESSER monies, and that's going away, and so we're going to take advantage of that for the upcoming year. But we fully expect that fund balance to be kind of more in line with a normal fund balance, if you will, after next year. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Our next slide gives a couple other funds. When I give the monthly financial report to the board, I always mention debt services. I mention capital projects because those are funds that have separate accounting. We have to make sure that we're keeping track of those funds, the monies that go in and the monies that come out of there. And so really in this fund, the only thing I really want to talk about, debt services fund only is to cover the debt of the school district. So any outstanding bond obligations, when people pay their property taxes, the state tells us how much money to put into our debt services based on the rate that has been established. Okay. I think our debt services rate right now is about $1.77. And so, of course, when you take that and multiply by our assessed valuation, it tells us the monies that we include in the debt services fund. We look at our total expenditures. What is our outstanding debt? So $4.3 million possibly receiving. And then we've got about $1.9 million going out in bond indebtedness. And so those are our obligations to pay our debt. So we are capturing money, more than enough monies to cover our debt service obligations. And so I wanted to make sure that we pointed that out as well. The next slide is our capital projects fund. And this is a very important fund as well, because under the capital projects fund, anything over $1,000, we have to classify as a capital expense, okay? And it has its own fund, all right? So those are those big computer purchases. That's when we do HVAC and roof repairs and those major things that we bring before the board. So our capital projects has a fund of its own. Right now, we're hoping to receive closely, in excess of $5 million in capital projects, but we're going to spend a little bit more than our receipts are, okay? This year, in the ESSER funds, we have included a number of capital improvements. We're going to do more roof repairs. We're going to do more HVACs. And so forth. And so we just want to make sure the board is aware, and we're going to monitor that capital projects fund to make sure that we have what's necessary to cover ourselves. Okay. So we've got roughly about $3 million in overages here. And again, that typically can be covered through a transfer or we do less of those capital expenditure projects. And so we're going to monitor that. We'll bring that to the board every month. That also is included in that fund balance report that we talk about on a monthly basis. So the next slide, I really just want to take a moment here for the sake of the new board members. I brought out that $32 million earlier. That's the money we get from the state, okay? And I wanted to explain how this foundation formula works. Somewhat, okay? It is the foundation formula. It's Missouri's primary method for distributing monies to public schools. And there are several things that go into this foundation formula. It's a very complex formula, okay? We don't have the time nor the abilities to explain that all in detail, but I will highlight some important pieces of the foundation formula. One of the most important pieces has to deal with student attendance, okay? attendance is a major consideration for the monies that we get. Okay. I am privileged to be one of the leaders for the attendance, and we're going to meet tomorrow to talk about some creative ways. But our reality is, okay, that we struggle with the attendance piece. Okay. We struggle. I think our overall attendance is somewhere around less than 40% as a whole for the school district. And the proportional attendance, you're right, okay? And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to drive our students to school every day, okay? The state has said 90% of the students need to be in school 90% of the time. All right. And that's how you get the big bucks. And so unfortunately, we've got to do some things to address our lag in attendance. Local property tax rates, they're also important when you consider the formula. Okay. The state has said if you can generate the money locally, we don't have to give it to you on the state level. Okay. And so that's also a consideration. As you all know, our reality is, again, we have one of the highest, if not the highest tax rate in St. Louis, North County. Okay. We've got a high tax rate. So you'll see those rates about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we went out for Proposition E, which is an operating tax levy increase, and we increased the tax rates. It passed by a supermajority, but it was very necessary to address some of the things that we were trying to do in the school district. Okay. And also the number of students who are disadvantaged, if you will, have special needs in our school districts. If we have summer school, all of these things kind of go and play into this formula, if you will, that the state uses to determine the amounts of monies our schools will receive. Okay. The very next slide, again, just breaks all of that down. It really talks about some of the same things that I've talked about. And the one thing that we can do to help ourselves is, again, do what we need to do to drive attendance. If our students are not here, we lose money. Okay. And so we have to do what we can to bring up our average daily attendance. There's also a state adequacy target. The top performing districts, if you will, what the state adequacy target does is looks at all of that. It compares how much does it take? You know, what are we spending on some of the top districts so we can make this thing adequate? Okay. So there's an adequacy target there. A dollar value multiplier simply looks at the cost of living and makes some adjustments there. And then they also, again, as I mentioned earlier, they take away any local effort if school districts. We know that some of the bigger districts with the higher assessed valuations, they can raise monies on the local level a lot more than we can. And so all of those things are considered when you talk about the state foundation formula. Okay. Some things that I want us to consider going forward. Next slide. I want to point out now I want to brag here on this slide. Okay. This slide talks about assessed property values. Okay. Assessed valuation. When you get your tax, you guys might have gotten something from the county assessor. Okay. I know I got my slip in the mail. All right. It wasn't your bill, but it was the notice telling you that your property values have gone up. Okay. Now, the flip side of that means what? That means your tax bill is going up. Okay. An increase to your property value means your tax bill is going up. And guess who gets those monies? Okay. School districts are entitled to a major portion of those monies. I am just so happy when I see the trends that are trending in the Riverview Gardens School District. Okay. Let's look at 2018. We were at about $190 million. And that number represents the total approximate values of all the properties, residential, commercial, all of those that roll up into our school district. Okay. In 2019, we saw an increase, okay, to 211. It relatively stayed the same in 2020. But in 2021, we saw another increase. In 2022, what did we do? We saw another increase. From 2022 to 2023, we saw one of the biggest increases that we've seen in a long time in this school district. We saw about a 34% increase in assessed valuation. What does that mean? That means our students and our families are living in homes that are increasing in value, okay? And we know when your homes increase in value, that's where people want to be, okay? People want to be somewhere where the homes are increasing in value and we're not losing value. And so I am very proud to report. Now, what does that mean? That means the school district is going to get some more money. We're going to get additional monies by way of property taxes because of the increase in assessed valuation, okay? And so those are things that we have to be proud of. Again, we're not going to pay all of our bills based on assessed valuation growing, but we can do some additional things with the increase in assessed valuation, okay? The next slide I want to talk about are just other things. And again, this is a slide that I mentioned often, but when we talk about our revenue and expenditure projections, again, we've got to look at the state formula. We've got to look at the property taxes and the tax rates. We'll be coming to the board in a couple of months to establish the tax rates for the 23-24 school year. We've also got to consider our collection rates, okay? I am proud to say that historically, roughly 95% of the people in this community pay their taxes, okay? And that's a good thing, all right? We've got to consider federal and state sources of any ESSER monies, Prop C. Again, those are things that we discuss under revenues in our expenditures, all right? We've got to be very conservative. We've got to consider any bargaining agreements that we may have. Insurance, we saw some big increases in our insurance rates for this coming budget season. Retirements, purchase services, again, tuition. I'm so glad that the transfer program is open, okay? Because the transfer program put this school district in a very, very tight situation.
Yes.
Okay? Were it not for the transfer program, we would be booming, if you will, in terms of our finances. Over that 10 or 12 year period, we spent more than $27 million sending our kids to other school districts. And we were on the hook for the tuition, okay? And so that program ended about a year or two ago. We no longer have those costs, okay? But again, when you look at where we have been, that really tells the story. That is part of our story. That's part of our narrative. When we lost accreditation, we had to send monies out of the door to other school districts, right? Our fund balances, okay? The past few years, we have seen very consistent and stable fund balances. Prior to the past few years, we've seen significant drops in our fund balances, okay? And so we're going to continue to monitor and closely watch our revenues and expenditures. I will say that once ESSER funds are gone, you'll hear me say it over and over, okay? We've got to reduce our expenditures, okay? And in the future, in the very near future, we've got to figure out ways to attract new revenues, all right? My colleagues and I are responsible for bringing in additional grants, and we're proud of those grants, all right? But we've got to get some new permanent revenue sources in this school district, okay? And so we'll be talking in the coming months, hopefully about some new measures that we can look at to make sure that we can sustain where we are. And I know that's the biggest word, sustainability. We've got to make sure that we can keep the things that we have where we have them, okay? Next slide. Proposition R, I'm always reminded, and we have a board presentation at the meeting next week where Ms. Green will give us an update on the Proposition R. Back in 2018, about 5 years ago, we passed Prop R. We've got about $11 million to do renovations and capital improvements. And I'm very happy to report that we've done about 29 different projects with those Prop R funds, right? And we completed those projects. And I think the proof is in the pudding. You'll see them. We've got new playground equipment. We've got new roofing. We've done some patching and abatement and emergency repairs and HVAC technology. And so we've done all of those things with Proposition R. So that is a promise that we kept. So I want to make sure that our board is aware of that. The next slide, please. Proposition E. Again, I mentioned to you about 2 years ago, we passed Prop E. Prop E at that time, we estimated would bring us an additional $4 million or so in our operating tax levy. Because assessed valuation has continued to grow, we're seeing more than $4 million in additional monies come through our doors. But we got to remember those priorities, right? We promised the public that we're going to continue to strive to regain full accreditation. And we're doing that on a daily basis. The superintendent is leading those efforts and those charges, and we're behind her 100%. We got to continue to expand early childhood. These are the promises that we've made, and a lot of these we're already doing, okay? Expanding transportation for students within a mile, okay? No longer are we denying students who live under a mile transportation to school. Why? Because we need them in school, okay? So whether you live a half a mile or a quarter of a mile and are not eligible for transportation, we're sending our student by there to pick them up, okay? Because our scholars deserve to be in school, and we need to eliminate whatever barriers there are, okay? Also, enhancing our salary schedule. During negotiations, we were very clear that in the last 3 years, we have given out more than 20% worth of raises, okay? Just to be more competitive. And you all have allowed us to make a valiant investment in our staff. And I'm going to tell you, we thank you for it, okay? As a special board, we thank you because you all have allowed us to have more competitive wages as a result of these propositions. And also community and adult educational programs, those plans are in the works as well. Next slide, please. These next 3 slides I'm going to go through pretty quickly. Thank you. We talked about ESSER monies. Remember, ESSER monies were just temporary monies that the federal government, they passed it through the state. Those are pass-through funds. The state was in charge of making sure school districts got those monies, but it was designed to help us prepare and prevent and respond to COVID, okay? Those were never meant to be long-term monies to do much of anything with. So our ESSER 1 monies, we got about $2.8 million in the first round of ESSER monies, okay? We spent 100% of those monies, all right? We didn't leave $1 on the table, right? And we bought Chromebooks, laptops, hotspots. We had our buildings cleaned. And this was the height of COVID in 2020 when we started spending those funds, all right? We needed subs, and we spent monies on sub services and sanitizing equipment. All of those things were as a result of ESSER 1 activities. Next slide, ESSER 2. How much did we receive in ESSER 2? Well, the second round of ESSER dollars, our district received more than $15 million, okay? Roughly, we're about 84%. As of today, that number will change again because we were spending more monies through our ESSER program, okay? Those funds, unfortunately, they climax in September of this year, okay? And so it is our goal and expectation that we will have spent 100% of those funds by that September the 30th deadline as well, okay? We're not going to be one of the ones guilty of sending monies back, saying that we couldn't use them. We can use those and some more, okay? And so again, we wanted to make sure that you all were aware of the ESSER 2 monies as well. Let's go to the next slide, ESSER 3. This is the big one here, okay? Our ESSER 3 allocation was more than $35 million. More than $35 million, okay? Over a 3-year period, we have started putting a dent into those funds as well, roughly about 28%. Now, these funds were more structured, and they came with more instructions from the state. The state says you've got to take 20% of these funds and address learning loss. Okay, and we have done that. Okay, we're investing in new curriculum measures. We've got new textbook adoptions. We're doing those things to address what the state has said that we must do. Okay, we do have a lot of capital projects in there as well. Okay, that's what we were using a lot of those monies to invest in those substitute teacher services and contracts that we had. Solution Tree is a big part of this $35 million. And so we're looking forward to, again, by September of next year, having spent the remaining monies in our ESSER 3 allocation. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure the board was really aware of those 3 pots of monies and what we have done with those revenues and expenses. Okay, all right. It would wait till I'm at the end of the presentation to come back on. But at this time, again, I think I did okay with keeping it under 30 minutes. But at this time, if there are any questions, let me say this. This is a preliminary budget. We fully expect that as by the full adoption. And so next week at the board meeting, I'll come back before you. We'll do another presentation like this. And so we will ask at that time that the budget be presented for discussion and action. The state requirement is that by June 30th, all school districts have adopted their budget for the next fiscal year. So this is preliminary. If there's anything that the board would like to see addressed here or anything that you need clarity on, please, by all means, email our superintendent. She will delegate those things or those questions that need to be addressed. But if there's any feedback that you have for the budget, then certainly let us know and we will make sure that we incorporate all of this information, okay? This does conclude the budget presentation for the 23-24 budget year. Are there any questions for me at this time?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, is that Ms. Lane?
Yeah.
I can hear you, Ms.
I heard every word you said. So whoever, I heard you also say it would wait until the end to go out, but I heard you from the very beginning, okay? Just so you know. And the question I have is regarding the ESSER funds. My question is, we are in ESSER 3 now, and we understand that we need to use those monies up for our students. And you laid out first of all, thank you for being so clear in your presentation. I understood everything you said. What happens to those programs that we depend or that we've initiated with ESSER 3 when those funds are no longer available?
Ms. Lane, you would ask the hard question, right?
Yes, I would.
Yes. So
if you can't be specific, maybe I'll rephrase it.
No.
I think that I'm certain there are provisions and talks about what we're going to do to transition from the availability of these funds to these funds not being available. So I guess I want to know, how do you choose as to what we are going to continue with, what we're not going to continue with? And you guys have begun that discussion?
Absolutely, Ms. Lane. And let me say this, it is a hard question, but it's only hard because, as you just alluded to, we've got to make the decision on which of those programs will stay. And when I say which will stay, some of these programs may become an obligation of the district's budget now. And so we've got to prioritize and we've got to determine which of those programs will stay and which of those programs will go. I don't know if you were peeking in our meeting this morning, but we talked about this morning. In fact, Dr. Patton and Mrs. Nave, we had a discussion centered exactly around this conversation. And so one of the things that I do know that I can share with you, Ms. Lane, is that we do have several other grants that the district has started to receive. One of those by which I think Dr. Patton has been responsible for getting is a wellness grant. Am I saying that right, Dr. Patton? It is a project wellness grant. It's more than $1 million. And some of the programs that currently ESSER is picking up, the Project Wellness Grant will take on for the foreseeable future, okay? So that's one of the good things about some of those programs ending. I know Ms. Nave was a really big advocate for a couple of the programs that she started. And again, the reality is some of these programs may become the obligation of our district, okay, our district budget. But we're hoping to bring in more revenues. We're hoping to receive reimbursements through the ESSER grants, and we're hoping to build our fund balance such that we can continue some of these programs. But to answer your question, the plan is either to get some other grants to pick them up or is to put them onto the district and let them become an obligation of the district's budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I was looking on page 1 and I was wondering where we were with generating the actuals for this budget year.
Okay, when you say, okay, this page 1.
Page
Okay,
1 of the
all right.
finance.
So here's the important piece about this. The fiscal year is not over with, okay? Unfortunately, it won't be over with until June 30th, all right? And so, Tony and I were talking just right before the meeting. And what we want to do, we can put a projected number in there on where we're going to end, but we don't know exactly where we're going to end. And so in terms of the actual numbers, the real true numbers will probably come after June 30th. And we will make sure that the board knows what those numbers are. But at this point, we can only project where we're going to end. We're still paying bills on a daily basis. Some of my colleagues are still emailing me, asking me if they can put in last minute requisitions. And so we're honoring those as well. But we do have some tentative information, Dr. Yvonne Elliott, but unfortunately, it won't be as precise until we close the books and we do our reclasses and things like that. So I just wanted to share that information with you.
Yeah, so I'm probably thinking more of a year to date than the final actuals. Yeah.
Okay.
And then going on from there, I did have a question about with the students, the allocation that we get. So when students transfer, because we enroll students throughout the year, is it prorated as far as the amount that the state give us for them? Because once they enroll in another district and they're counted for their funding, what portion of the allocation do we get when they transfer to us? Is it a period of time or how does that work?
So I don't want to give you the wrong answer to that.
Okay.
And so what I would ask is, let me send you a written response that we can share with the entire board, because I don't want to give you the wrong answer to that. My instinct tells me one thing, but when you talk about a student coming in for a certain period of time, then they're leaving, it gets real fuzzy. I do know that, and Dr. Pruitt-Adams, you can help me with this. Is it in October that DESE looks at the attendance number? There's one, is it the third or fourth Thursday or two?
Yeah, it's the third Thursday in, is it Wednesday, I want to say. Wednesday in the month.
Right. In September, okay.
And they look at the overall student enrollment.
Right. Right.
But Dr. May is right, we have students coming in and out. We actually had some students enrolled the last week of school. But it's based upon that last Wednesday in September. So
right.
Where they were and the time 30 that
and they can be here at 9:30.
Exactly. And that's what I'm looking to give you in writing, but I think my colleagues have solidified it. So as of that 9:30 report, that's why we are on the hook when they're here. And then in October, November, December, they go somewhere else. And we're fitting the bill for
Right.
those tuition
So we're not
costs.
getting any additional.
Right.
Now, I'm on the CSIP committee. I wanted to know whether or not everything that's allocated here, when they complete the CSIP, and they indicate maybe the funds that may be allocated for whatever the objectives are, is already embedded in the budget. So it's not like it's something separate that
Right.
needs to be spelled out. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, once the CSIP is approved, we're not bringing you back. We would probably bring you back some budgeted item. Right now, we've got tentative budget numbers out there. And so we'll be more specific, but we're not bringing you a whole new budget that's going to change. A lot of the ESSER and a lot of the GOB has already considered those allocations. So yes, to answer your question.
Okay. And when we do this budget review, we're going to have to come back and do some amendments to like approve some amendments to the budget where you might have done transfers throughout the year, or did you have board approval before the transfers, or will we have to do it at the end?
Good question. So every month we give you a budget transaction report, okay? And it is on the consent agenda. And so those things come to you every board meeting. It doesn't even have to be every month. Any changes, any fund transfers. One of the ways that we add our title budget fully is through a budget supplement into the next year. And so we're going to be bringing to the board all year long supplements or transfers or things of that nature, so that the board is fully aware of how the budget will be impacted. And again, what we have to watch is that fund balance report that I give you on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. It really goes beyond, I guess, the scope of the presentation for tonight, which I thought was very good, Dr. Singleton. Thank you. My question has to do with really what happens after the ESSER funds are really completed. Are there any type of tentative projected budgets for 24-25? I'm really concerned about what happened, as everyone is.
Sure. And it's kind of similar to what Ms. Lane was saying. Really, I think that, if we take away those ESSER revenues and expenses and get ourselves back to what a normal year would look like, we don't have any projections for next year. And let me provide some clarity to what I'm saying. There is a small piece of ESSER 3 that we will adopt next year, okay? And that will be because we made a 3-year commitment with Solution Tree. So there's a small piece of money that we're hoping that will bleed over into the next budget, but we're talking just a couple $1 million. We're not talking about anything substantial, because we want to continue the work of Solution Tree, okay? And we made a 3-year commitment for that. But to answer your question, a normal budget for us is about $60 million, okay? And so when we see the 95 and the 85 on the revenues and expenditures, that's an abnormal budget, okay? So a normal budget for us, $60 to $65 million in revenues, and we have just about that in expenditures as well. So that, to me, that's probably what our projections will look like for the 24-25 school year.
Okay. And you mentioned the significance and the importance of the average daily attendance.
Yes.
And the need for an emphasis being placed on increasing student attendance. So maybe this is a question for Superintendent, I'm not sure, but what specifically really are we able to say is happening with those efforts to increase the average daily attendance for the students? I'll go back and remember. What can we do to increase? Where's the emphasis in the budget on the increasing average daily attendance for student population?
The more students we have, the more money we get.
Sure.
So we have to find a way, and that's one of the key pieces or the big rocks that's coming in the CSIP plan is we identified the critical areas in attendance and staffing, including academic achievement. So Dr. Singleton is in charge of that subgroup. So we've talked about incentives, we've talked about accountability for parents. Our biggest absentee rate is kindergarten and first grade. And then that spills over then middle school and high school. So you have those siblings staying home to take care of the little one. And so we talked policy today. We talked the impact that poor attendance has on academic achievement and conveying that to parents, but also the key piece about parent accountability. And then we have to make school a place where kids want to come.
Yeah.
Where kids realize that if I am going here, I'm going to be treated fairly, I'm going to get a good education, I'm going to build relationships. And that does not always.
And let me add to what Dr. Pruitt Adams is saying. This budget that we're going to adopt also includes a stronger commitment in staffing. We changed our Secretary 1 positions to Secretary 2. We know that one of the things that you know, if people are paid well and they're given benefits, that's always a more attractive position. And so our attendance secretaries, we've added them at all of the buildings. Okay, sometimes it's not that the students are there, as we talked earlier. Sometimes they're there, they're just not in class. Okay, and it's not being reported properly. And so this budget does include a stronger commitment to having attendance secretaries, holding our home to school coordinators, bringing some structure to those positions as well, going out, and doing more outreach and educating our families on the importance of attendance. And again, tomorrow we're going to talk about some things like a buddy system, somebody with good attendance, all right? They need to be paired with those and be buddies or influencers of those who have not so good attendance. We used to have attendance contracts in this school district. So after you've missed so many days, one of the things that came out in district leadership today was that we need to make not only those concern calls, but we need to make good calls as well. We need to call parents and say, hey, listen, your students have been here the first 10 days of this school year, okay? And we applaud you. Keep them coming, okay? That's how you keep up that. And then those that have had challenges with attendance, we've got to make those calls as well. And so we're doing everything that we can. We're going to be reaching, as far as we can to try to improve those things related to attendance.
Dr. is that relationship we also with parents. And customer service, we've talked about that, is critical to building that relationship with parents, making them feel welcome when they walk in the building, listening to them. And then one of the key things that we've heard is giving feedback. So one of the things we're putting into place is called Let's Talk. Right? That's where a parent can call in and it will direct their call to the appropriate individual. And it lets us know if they haven't received the call back in a doable amount of time, then we need to take some other steps. But we have to make parents know that they're a partner with us in this. And that's business.
May I ask another question, please?
Yes.
Yes, Ms.
Thank you. Dr. Singleton and Superintendent, are there legal parameters that impede us from what I recall? We used to have something called truant officers, where there was someone who actually went to the parent's house if the child was chronically absent. And I don't hear that term anymore. So I don't know if that's a legal thing that we can or cannot do. And then the second thing was, I understand we're in different times, but I was having this conversation with a community member who explained to me, as responsible as she was, when her children were small, they were late all the time. And the principal told her, if you bring your child in late one more time, I'm going to send them back home. Well, they were late the one more time. And to her surprise, the principal was walking the children back to her house. Now, I know we've got 5,400 students. That's probably not a practical thing to do. But are we bound by some legalities on what we could do? Because it seems to me school attendance is an option, and I didn't think that it was an option. I thought it was mandatory that children had to go to school.
So to answer your question, that's what Dr. Singleton alluded to when he said our homeschool coordinator. So whenever a child is absent, there's a call that goes out to them. And what we talked about today is rather than have that virtual call go out and say, Devon is not in school today, have the teacher call. That first point, that's that point of building relationship. But we also have home to school coordinators. And that's a part of their job is to do home visits, to make sure that everything in the home, the needs are being met as well, because sometimes it's the unspoken need that keeps students from coming to school. Now, I will also tell you what we have not done on a regular basis is when we start to see a pattern, because we do have some students who have patterns. You can miss 20 days and not be dropped. And so we have some students who show up every 21 days, and then they're not dropped. Then we don't follow back sometimes on our job. It's going to sound negative. Sometimes you are pushed to call educational neglect because not sending the kid to school for various reasons, you know, your home could be in distress and you just keep the kid home. But if we do educational neglect, there can be an investigation and maybe get that kid back in school. And we've not done that either. That's an accountability piece for parents. And I think they've come to know we're not going to do. And so there's no incentive for them even to send their kids to school. And then when this comes time for promotion, we promote them anyway. So have we then diminished the importance of being that thing? And we had that conversation today as well.
I have a question.
She had her shoulders on her. Go ahead. Okay.
Okay. On the operating budget revenue slide, the grants that you mentioned that have come in, did you say they're under other? Like the security grant and stuff like that?
Yeah, so yes, those would be considered in the other local category, the safety and security grant, yes.
Okay, so what's in the regular other? What did you say was in the regular other then?
Oh, down below, those are just miscellaneous. So occasionally we will get miscellaneous checks, and Tierney's not in here. Goodness, and we get these things all the time. I can send that to you. These are small amounts. These are things that we don't really budget for, but they consistently come in. And yeah.
You have to figure out that. Now, I know that SLPS, Jennings, and Normandy, the three of them have foundations. Do we not have like a Friends of Riverview or anything, or have there been any discussions for that to be established so then we can get those additional funds? Can corporations just directly give to us, or is it the type of structure we are that makes the foundation more favorable to businesses than just directly given to us?
Okay, I'm gonna try to. No, you go ahead, Dr. Prudence. Okay.
And Ms. Oswald may do better.
And that's what I was going to put it.
There is a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And last year, I believe it was, we were going out for a grant with Boeing, and they wanted to go through our foundation. And it was difficult. It was difficult due to personal reasons on, I believe, the board president's part. It was difficult with the trade. When I say the board, the foundation, the board president, it was just difficult, and we never could get them together. We even met with the Alumni Association, and they promised, and some of them gave back like in labor, but they said they were going to work to get the foundation up and running. And we have said that when that time comes, we are willing and ready to partner with them. But at this point in time, it's not a truly, unless Ms. Oswald knows different, it's not a truly functioning foundation right now.
Can the corporations just give to us directly, or is there a barrier with
When
with the
we get
structure?
donations, they go to Dr. Patton. There's a process we follow. The Regional Business Council has given us, they gave us money for to update the software for Keystone, which is an HR piece. They gave us some money for the back to school bash. They've given us money for T-shirts for our kids, but we've not had any major corporations at this point in the last at least 3 years give us major big dollars.
Most corporations try to funnel through a foundation because of the charitable write-off that they're entitled to. And so corporations can give directly to the school district, but the school district itself is not the 501c3. So therefore, you may not get the tax benefits of that donation by donating directly to the school district. But we won't turn anything down. But I think, as you are alluding to, it's important to get the foundation up and running so that we can use the foundation to support the school district efforts.
With the funds, are we able to do any incentives that would go directly to the parents when it relates to attendance? And can we also use funds for any attendance incentive for staff as well?
Yeah.
Because we know that attendance issue is across the board. The pandemic effect is on the rise with everybody. So can funds be allocated for that and it be legal?
Yeah, that's something we definitely need to research. And we got to be very careful when we talk about using funds for, and again, one of the words that we've taken out of our vocabulary is bonuses, okay, and incentives. All right, we try to use the word stipend or something that's more along the legal terms. But when you talk about incentivizing and things like that, the state tends to frown on some of that. Dr. Pruitt-Adams, you want to add something?
We legally can't say bonus. We do have a perfect attendance for staff, I believe. I'm trying to see mine. We do have something for perfect attendance for staff. And I will tell you what Dr. Patton does out of her student services. They have a parent advisory committee. They give gift cards. They have the dinners. They do those types of things, raffles all the time to try to incentivize our parents to be here. We can't give them money. The other thing we've done to try to get parents involved in the PTOs is we've given them, because they have to do a background check, we have given them vouchers to cover the background checks so that they can get involved. So we've done those things, but we're not averse to looking at what else we can do, but we can't pay them.
Right. So I said incentives.
Right.
I did not say bonus. So because they got Cardinals Foundation, they got all these people who have money. They give out tickets, give out discounts to Chick-fil-A or something. It's something that we can do that kind of boost, their participation in coming to work, because we know across the board between the two is a challenge, the students and the staff. So
I agree.
Okay, that was all my questions.
So that was one of the things that I had. I'm very concerned that we don't get updates or what have you from the RGSD Foundation. And I would like to see if there's a way that we can have some type of meeting with them to see where they stand with what's going on with them.
You know that Ms. Oswald is a member. Maybe she can give us some guidance on, if there's a new president, a new treasurer, because that may have changed by now, but we're willing to work with them. We just need to know if they're willing to work.
Right. The other thing that I had, it's ironic that we were talking about attendance because it's a problem across the state.
Everywhere.
It is really a bad problem across the state. And so one of the things that was mentioned, and I was not aware that many years ago, Review Guards had the attendance contract. And while I was sitting watching the delegate assembly, that was a conversation that I overheard that some school districts are going to start adopting that with this. And also they're going to start holding for those parents who have students that are in poor attendance. They're going to have a social service organization actually hold a meeting. And this might be something we want to do because some parents really don't understand, that they're risking educational neglect.
That's right.
It also applies to students who disrupt classrooms. They talked about that. students that disrupt classrooms can also be, I don't want to mix the word, can also be held liable for causing educational neglect by showing out. And so these are things that we may want to find some type of way to get over to our parents that, hey, you know, this going on, you could get sued by a parent because your kid is bullying or your kid is, you know, because they're affecting the teacher's ability to educate. The other thing that you mentioned, and I have it over here on the factors that impact our budget. I know that the excess values grew 34%, but have we done some type of survey of the municipalities and those communities that tie into review? Because also with high, and I'm a banker, so when you start having increased property value, you also have an influx of people that can't pay their taxes, and that puts them at risk of foreclosure. So I would, if we haven't, maybe we can make an inquiry of our cities or the communities that feed into Riverview to find out where that kind of stands within their community, if that's legal for us to get.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look into that. You know, what helps this school district, and you know, it's obvious, it's our narrative. A number of the property owners in this school district are investors. Okay. And that's the one thing that they do good is they make sure that they pay their taxes to keep their properties. And so we have a lot of that. And so, but as you mentioned, you know, with the increase in assessed valuation, increase in taxes, certainly that does cause some challenges for some of our homeowners in the community. So we'll look into that.
And then the final question, probably you can't even answer, but I noticed that another conversation, I had this when I was eating dinner, is that some of the cities outside of St. Louis are dealing with the same problem with people that are driving around on temp tags. I saw one today that was out as of 2020, January of 2020. So there is talk about reaching out to the legislature, and this hasn't been finalized anything, but there is talk about reaching out to the legislature to try to withhold some of these people income tax money, because, you know, 2 and 3 years, you've probably got a couple of income tax checks. So I'm just saying we might want to look out for that, because some people are proposing that the legislature do something about it because of the number of people that are driving around and then they don't have insurance, you know, because they don't have the cars registered. So.
You know, it's ironic you mentioned that. Dr. Pruitt-Adams was on a panel 2 weeks ago at Danforth. I believe Marlene Terry had talks with Terry, and the St. Louis County Police Chief got up, and that was his number one concern, was the temp tax, you know. And I know that and I've seen the news clippings on it, because it's all tied to sometimes these dealers don't properly register the cars, and so people are taking advantage. They never go in and pay the sales taxes on the vehicles and so forth. And so that is a major issue in St. Louis, not just St. Louis County, but all over. Yeah. But I know the police talked about that.
But the other thing he said was they are short-staffed.
Yeah.
And if they are dealing with criminal incidents, they don't have the physical time to really do the temp tag.
Right. Yeah. So that's all I have.
I think the push here would be for legislation to pass laws that say that those sales tax be included in the purchase of the car and the financing of the car, and you can eliminate that problem altogether.
Yes, I agree.
I have a question. Going back to the homeschool coordinators.
Yes.
So how many homeschool coordinators do we have for the district? Is that a dedicated position, or is it a part-time position, or?
Dedicated position. Most of them are funded out of federal programs. But we do have a couple that are funded out of the general operating budget. So at this point, I believe every school has a home to school coordinator. The high school has approximately 3 or 4. I know Central has 2, and I believe Westview has 1 or 2. Well, allocations. They may not have a physical body in the position, but we do have allocations for them at every location. except for early childhood.
Okay.
So what do? They just go out to the home?
So they should be conducting home visits. They should be making phone calls to parents. They should be identifying resources when students have, excessive absences. So their main role is to be that connection or that liaison between the school and the home. It gets to whatever the issue is, they should be looking for resources to resolve the absenteeism.
And really, Gordon, we're allowing the children to be absent, what, 20 times?
By state statute, state law. At one point, it was 10 days and you could drop. And then it changed in 2016, that is 20 days before you drop them. And by dropping them, you can take them off your roll back to the last day of attendance. But people have figured that out. And so we have some, actually had a couple this school year at the middle school who would come every 21 days. Stay a couple of days, then go back out for 20 and come back in. But on the flip side, we did not do our job in contacting beyond the little call saying your kid's not in school. And so I said, you need to hotline this so that their parent knows. And the parents who called me at the end of the school year and said, well, I want to send my kid back for the remainder of the year. What's going to happen? What's the impact? I said, they need to finish math testing for one. There's still teaching and learning going on for two. And the fact that you are telling me means I'm going to hotline you. And so, but they have to know, sometimes they don't think about the impact that it has on their students' learning and their progression through the educational system is the right now.
Share a little bit of insight. I was at an alternative program and I learned that the families that get Social Security benefits is tied to attendance. I mean, them being enrolled in school. So they'll get enrolled, get the paperwork that they need to get the benefits, and nobody ever reports that the child is no longer attending, they still get the benefits. So if we connect all the pieces, then we'll be able to address some of the issues if they know something is going to be taken away from them because the child is not attending.
In Illinois, when it's tied to whatever state services they receive. So if their students up there, they start to lose their state services, and parents don't want to lose that. Missouri does not do the same thing. We can do better. Ideally, we would have the home to school coordinators working with the attendance secretary as well as the counselors, making home visits, sending out the step letters. We do send out step letters and make phone calls. But if we could figure out a way to tie into benefits that they're receiving, our attendance rate would improve.
Now, you said the busing, like for children, if they want to go to another district.
Yeah, hammer.
We no longer have that. They can't leave our district and go to Pattonville and then.
Right, no, yeah. So no, we don't, we're no longer, that program is ended about 2 years ago. It was called the transfer program, where we had to pay the tuition of our scholars because we were unaccredited. We had to pay for our scholars to go to districts like Pattonville, Ladue, Lindbergh, all those other schools. And the district had to pay not only the tuition, but the cost of transportation as well to get those students there. So that program is ended.
Now, do we, I'm just asking right now, do we, I understand that the state mandated 20 days. I mean, is there a way we can do 10 days on our policy and report to the state when it goes over to?
We have steps we can take with contacting that parent and doing those things, but we cannot officially withdraw them until that 20 days is met. We argued that earlier this year and no go.
I have a question. There's an observation as a community leader. And what I saw in two different schools in the district is one school automatically started with the PTO at the beginning of the year. The other school didn't have a PTO because of lack of funds. And I guess the background check that you were talking about. What can we do as a district to help them, the ones that can't afford the background checks? But I saw the other school, they did fundraisers. Like they started their PTO at the beginning of the year. They automatically started got parents engaged. And I noticed just from doing different districts, different schools, that the attendance rate was very high. I saw that just from the little events they had. They had a whole lot of parent involvement because they got the parents, they grasped them in the beginning. And they didn't have any excuses about, hey, we can't do this because of the funds. What can we do as a district to make sure that those parents are getting grabbed at the beginning of the year? Because those kids were going to school more because they were involved.
I'll let Dr. Patton say something, then I want to add something.
I was just gonna add, what we were able to do this year is for each school,
Get 10 what we call coupon codes for parents to redeem to pay for background checks. Now that would only pay for the fingerprinting. That's normally $48 and some change, but they still will be responsible for the Family Care Safety Registry check, which is social services, and that's about $14. So we were able to do that this school year. Now, we didn't have it in place at the beginning of the school year, but we eventually were able to get those coupon codes, and the principals were made aware of that. Thank you.
and so, Ms. Jackson, that is the expectation of our district, that each school have a parent-teacher organization. We have a parent engagement specialist that works with them, that comes out of federal programs. And so and sometimes it's the motivation of the leader to go ahead and get them started. Other times it is the funding, the background checks that are necessary. So with the scholarship, so to speak, that we were able to obtain, a lot of our schools use that, and they will start off the school year next year using it. So we'll have a better chance of grabbing the parents at the beginning of the year to bring them in. But that is our goal, that every school have a parent-teacher organization at the beginning of the next school year.
The other thing you find in school districts is that you have a really strong parent engagement at the elementary level. And then when they progress to middle school, parents step back a little bit. Instead of leaning in, they lean back. And then when you get to high school, it gets even worse. And part of that is due to student choice. So a school could say, we're gonna have this big, huge PTO meeting. And if you give the note to a middle schooler or a high schooler, the chances of it getting home, slim to none. But at the elementary level, it's all backpacked, it's gonna get home, and parents look into it. And that's the progression almost everywhere. But as Dr. Patton indicated, the expectation is that all schools will have a PTO.
Okay. And you, I'm sorry, you just said that you can send it home in the backpack. I understand that. Is there any way, because I know we have that text and we have that email, can we send it out that way also to the middle school?
Absolutely we can, if the parents opt in for the text.
Okay.
Yeah, for the robocall, do we have?
We have the robocalls that can recruit parents. And what we do is when each school is having an event, they'll do a robocall about that particular event as well. So we have those options. But there's the parents who we really, really, really need to come are the ones we need the answer for how to get them to come. The ones who would benefit the most. We had a town hall back in December on mental health and crime. We had all of our agencies there, all of them. And we outnumbered people in the room. And the parents who were there were the parents who always come. But we wanted to be able to afford our parents the opportunity without them having to go and seek out social services help. We had the packed dinner where we had, how many families sign up?
We had over 50 families signed up.
And 13 showed up.
13 showed up.
So we've got to find a way that they're going to come. And, you know, somebody mentioned a parent compact, a contract. I remember as a principal having those.
Now, do you have to have the background check just to be a member of the PTO, or is that for interacting with the students?
My understanding is now you have to have a background check to be on the PTO. Monica can clarify that. Back in the day, you didn't have to, but my understanding is now you do.
So supposedly, the new state law is if you're going to be in contact with students, you need to have the background check. And so it's just, it's a safety precaution. It's just best practice that if they are a part of the PTO, they might come in contact with students, field trips, parties, whatever they have. So it's best that they have it.
I know, when we had a active debate team here, I did have to, and I was a board member at that time, I had to also register as a volunteer coach for the debate team. So I had to go through the background check and all of that because I was going to be working with other students. So
Yeah, and I think we need to do a better job of the background checks. I think are they $50 one? I'm not sure. $48.
Dr. Patton, they can't hear you.
Oh.
I do want to make sure though, so that no one, this is a public meeting, says
Right.
we're off the agenda, that
Okay,
you
so-
tie the monies back to the budget.
right. That's what
Okay.
that's what my question is. Okay, here. Okay.
So one of the things that our building leaders will start to do next year is with the families that we do have that have passed the background checks and are on our PTO to do fundraisers, as you said, to help pay for the background checks of other members who want to join the PTO.
Mhm.
So we are working on doing that as well.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So going back to capital improvements,
Yes,
I'm wondering if there are any significant capital improvements that you're envisioning or foreseeable after the 23-24 year, ESSER funds are over with. So are the things that we should be thinking about that are really out there that need to be taken care of?
so let me say this, and I've invited Ms. Green up because we're working on a long-term capital plan. One of the things that this budget does not include, and you all should be aware of, is that Representative Terry, for the last couple of years, we have been trying to work together on a capital request, if you will, from the state. As of now, there's about $13 million in the state budget that Ms. Terry has included, okay? We have until July 15th before the governor, determines if he's going to veto or not. So far, we're crossing our fingers and we're hopeful that those monies will come into the district, which will allow us to do some major improvements around here. But in terms of as you were going long-term beyond the next couple of years, what are the major things that are going on? I'll let Ms. Green speak to a couple of those.
Good evening, Special Administrative Board. As Dr. Singleton said, we do have a capital project list that's about 5 to 7 years. I've been working on that. And we do have roofing. We've done a lot of repairs, but some of our roofs need to be replaced. Right now, we're working on the high school, getting a portion of buildings 3 and 4 completely replaced. But most of our roofs, we don't have the capital funds to replace them all. So we are doing major repairs. There are tuck pointing issues all over throughout the district. So of course, we have tons of things that we could use capital monies for. Asbestos abatement, right now we're doing it at Highland, but we have Danforth that we need to get done, and Central Middle School and the high school. And to do completely the whole school, we're talking about millions of dollars because you have to abate it and then you have to put it back, like remodel and put down floors when we take up the asbestos flooring. So we have some projects, major projects, and to get rid of some boilers that are covered with asbestos as well.
Question. This is based on budget. Do we do any utilization studies as far as the buildings to determine whether or not we're fully, I guess maybe the cost of running the building is aligned with, how many students are there and all of that to determine whether or not we should be having discussions about closing buildings and reallocating students for resource purposes?
Well, we have not, as far as I know, we have not done that to find out whether or not we should close schools. Is it beneficial to close buildings? But we have done studies on how we can put in better energy saving equipment. And at my next meeting, I'm hoping to have Ameren, because of Prop R, we had over $140,000 returned to us, incentives or rebates because we're using energy efficient equipment. And as we replace rooftop units, as we replace those, we do have Ameren come in and give us a study to show us, if we use, it's called SEER, but I'm trying to think of how to really explain it. But just to see if we have like 4 stars, 5 stars to receive energy rebates. And if we put that equipment in, then Ameren will give us a rebate check for putting in energy star saving equipment. And that's what we do every time we replace a rooftop unit or a boiler.
Have we had any facility audits like in the last 5 or 10 years that fully evaluate all of the buildings?
Not since I've been here. We've had companies offering us to do that, but what's the name of the company? They want to do it, but then there's like you have to apply for low interest loans for them to do it. So because of our budgets, we opted not to do that.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
We will need to have some type of utilization study because we have one building that has less than 150 students in it. And look to see how we could possibly repurpose that building, not close it, but repurpose it for something else. The other thing, we had a mini, facility study when we went through the civil rights review. And that was back early spring. And they looked at handicap accessibility, whether our classrooms were meeting those needs. They looked at our parking lots, how they were marked. And so we had no violations there, but it did, I think, for us, open our eyes to what we should and could look at as it relates to facilities. They know that I believe our facilities are in dire need of repair, and they put some things in place to address that. But as Ms. Green said, it's going to cost more money than we have in the budget to address all of the facilities needs that we have.
Are there any additional questions? These are good questions too. Thank you all. Okay.
Ready. Thank you so much. And we will bring this back for discussion and action at the board meeting next Tuesday.
Therefore, members, with no further business to discuss, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
May I have a second? Okay. Are there any questions?
No.
Roll call vote. I want to do a roll call.
Ms. Fishburne?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Molinaro?
Yes.
Mr. Horsley?
Yes.
Dr. May?
Yes.
Dr. Cole?
Yes. We are adjourned.
Ms. Lane?
Oh.
Ms. Lane? Ms. Lane? Ms. Lane?
Yes. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
We are
ma'am.
adjourned. We are adjourned.
Thank you all. Thank you all.